So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Healthusiasm Podcast, which is a panel discussion on innovations in health and self-care. My name is Christophe Choquet. I am a health business expert, speaker, and a author. And every month or so, I speak with a couple of experts to find the health innovations, the health tech innovations very often that we would love to share with our audience. These are the innovations that we want to share because they are changing health and happiness. And for this discussion, we have two of the beloved of the recurring experts in our panel, which is from France, but enjoying work life in Barcelona, digital health connector Aline Noiset.
Hola.
From Colombia, but living in Berlin here, we have digital health expert for startups, Nia Escobar-Kulle.
Guten Tag.
That means that we have two of our regular panelists that are not there, which is medical expert in digital innovation, Dr. Keith Grimes, and human experience expert, Mo Zouina. Now, if we are missing out on our own experts, we always invite other experts, some new blood, some new innovation that we would like to have on. And in this case, we always invite a special guest. And we have from Italy, and you might know him, globally pioneering digital health with Eversana as the president of Eversana, I think the president of health innovation, but also the chairman of Frontiers Health, Roberto Ascioni.
Ciao tutti.
And last but not least, I think also with roots in Italy, correct? But globally known as the it girl of health tech interviewing, the founder of What's the Future Health, Jessica Damassa.
Hi.
Well, thank you all for being here. Now, for the ones listening to this podcast, we also have somebody else. In football, it's called the 12th man. In basketball, it's called the 6th man, and that is the fans, the audience. This is the first time that the Healthusiasm Podcast is live, that we have an audience. Could you all please share or maybe clap and say hi? Now, this is how it goes. Thank you very much. So we are live in Berlin. We are here for the 10th edition of Frontiers Health. Roberto, I have to say congratulations, I think, right?
Thank you very much.
It is quite an achievement. And I mean, to me, it's the second year that I've been here in a row, and it just feels like coming home every time again. The people you see, the vibe there is, the different settings. I mean, you can see all the smiling faces even here in the room. I mean, I have to congratulate on what you're doing.
Thank you very much. I think, as I said this morning, this started as a conference, became a community, and now is really a movement. And we enjoy people that come back every year or most of the years, and always new ones. This is now about 20,000 people globally.
Wow.
Equally distributed between pharmaceutical company, payer, policymakers, doctor, patients, startups, of course, scale-ups, and all that are connected to the health innovation.
Yeah, I gotta love it. And I have to say, I mean, what struck me most when I came here the first time is the equal balance between you have pharma, you have startups, you have people that think about the future and so forth. And I think this balance is really exceptional and gives a very good vibe here on the floor as well.
Yeah, it takes a lot to do that, but that's the way we conceived this over 10 years ago, because this healthcare needs systemic innovation. That's I'm convinced about. It's not like that you can tackle only the consumer and forget the payers, right? And all of that, the combinations. So we really wanted to do something that was not only about venture capital and startups or only pharma or pharma and payers. We want to really have them all. It took 10 years, but I can say that probably, and you'll judge over the 2 days, I think we probably have achieved that ecosystem presence, so to say.
You definitely have. So back to the Healthusiasm Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Not here as the chairman of Frontiers Health. We want you because you are one of the pioneers in digital health, just like Jessica as well, of course. Now, if you're not familiar with the Healthusiasm Podcast, what we normally do is we meet once a month with a couple of experts. And what we do is we share these innovations that we think you need to know about. Now, in this session, we will do it slightly different. We will look back. We're almost at the end of 2025. So we asked all of the panelists, what were the health innovations that really stood out this year? What were the headlines that you would love to share with the audience? And well, all of us will bring a couple of these innovations and we will debate them very spontaneously. You also have to know most of this podcasting is not prepared at all. We kind of know what we were talking about, but that is the beauty about it. It is how it needs to flow. And let's start off with the first Healthusiasm. And I think it's one of the most awesome ones because Aline, you want to talk about awesome, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So Awesome is a project that launched on 14th of July. So I remember the date because I'm French and it's our national day. So that's sticking in my mind. So Awesome stands for Alice Walton School of Medicine. So it's a new school of medicine that was launched this year. They welcomed their first cohort, and it's really redesigning medical education. So it's a 4-year program. It's based in Arkansas, and Alice Walton is one of the heirs of Walmart. So the school was built on a property, and what they're doing, what's special about that program, it's really focused on prevention and on whole health principles. So they don't look just at symptom-based treatment, but really taking into account mental health and also lifestyle changes. So it's a 4-year program. They got the basic education, like scientific education, and for that, they have partnership with schools like Stanford Medicine and other top schools to bring their professors to give the courses. And then on side of that, they have extracurricular activities that part of the program, like gardening, cooking, art classes. And there's an arts museum next to the school, and there's a path going directly to the museum so they can go and take classes over there. So I think it's really shaping things differently. They also do nutrition classes. That's a big focus. And they have a partnership with Mercy, the healthcare system over there, because they really want to apply those learning, what the students are learning in the school, to the healthcare system. So it's not a pilot. It really gets adopted afterwards. So I think it's very promising, and I hope we're going to see more medical schools like that in the US and in the rest of the world.
And first of all, to piggyback on the art thing, the reason why they included art was mainly because if you look at art, you look at things differently. And they really want the physicians of the future to look at things as if you would look at art. So in a different way, more deeper and so forth. And I really like that idea about it. And they even go very deep into everything that is AI, digital health, drones delivery, everything that you can imagine. I mean, we often talk definitely at events as well about it's all good. We have the innovators here in the room. We have a couple of clinicians who are innovators. But then we don't have the education. And I think this is one of the best examples that I've ever seen in education when it comes to medical education, because it really changes the entire perspective of health.
But maybe also something important is that so Arkansas is located in more like a rural area, and their hope is that those students are going to stay in those rural areas because they also have an issue with healthcare workforce over there. So I think that's another like positive aspect of that school.
Changing health education. And it's driven by a woman, Alice Walton. And then, which makes me bring to the another Healthusiasm, because women need to drive healthcare, I believe. This is one great example, but there's a lot of things that are happening here. I see half of the audience here is also women. So you need to drive healthcare. Tell me, Jessica, what is the Healthusiasm that you have found that you wanted to share about last year?
I think that this year is the year that the world has entered menopause. Everybody is talking about menopause this year, which is a huge difference to what we've experienced in the past. And even here in the innovation community, in the past, it's been about childbearing. It has been about period tracking, fertility, and now all of a sudden, it's like, let's talk about perimenopause and menopause. And people even know what the difference between those things are, which is incredible because that's another delineation that people were not aware of before. So we have a lot of businesses in the US that are scaling up, really leveraging that virtual first model where they're able to see a clinician who's more trained in different types of standards of care that meet women's needs during perimenopause and in menopause. And then they have access to a wider range of treatments and integrations. And then two things that are really hot that have really caught my attention in the last month. Number one, we saw at Health, the big conference in the US, Jessica Federer, who's a friend of Frontiers, she launched the Women's Health Fund, which is a fund of funds. And what they're trying to do is increase the amount of money that goes into the research in pharma to help develop new treatments, cures, and diagnostics for women. Because remember, women were not included in clinical trials until 1993. And now, with everything that we know about how important estrogen is to absolutely everything in our bodies, there's a huge opportunity to completely recreate the future of women's health care based on this knowledge and the fact that even culturally, it's more accepted to talk about where women are at in perimenopause and menopause. And then last thing, breaking news from America yesterday. My phone lit up and so did my eyes because the FDA has finally removed the black box labeling on hormone replacement therapy for women, which is huge. So if you want to get right now, well, up until like yesterday, if you wanted to get an estrogen patch or an estrogen cream, the doctor would have to go through serious hoops to prescribe this because it had the most serious restriction on these drugs. And the reason for that was a study that was done, the Women's Health Study. I'm sure many of you have heard of this. It's infamous, not famous, because they did these hormone replacement studies on a group of women who were in their 70s and 80s, and then were surprised that they all had cancer. And so that took back the field of women's health, particularly with hormone replacement. And we've still been living in that world with a black label on these drugs. And so now, as of yesterday, gone. And it's a new dawn, the dawn of menopause in the world.
And it's remarkable that you brought up menopause, because I think it was in February or April. So every month, every 2-3 weeks, we discuss about what we want to bring to the Healthusiasm podcast and about what innovations we want to talk about. And I think these two ladies came up with, we need to talk about women's health and we need to talk about menopause. I think it's episode 47, and it was an entire episode only on all the innovations that we saw in menopause, which was, I mean, we could have gone on. And I think the feedback was that we need to do more. And I think in February, March, we need to do it again, maybe the women's only podcast, as we like to say it. So menopause is definitely the talk of the town, but there's something else which has been around the past 2 years and has been the talk of the town, and that's GLP-1s, obesity. There's a lot happening there. And I think, Nia, you want to bring some insights or some healthusiasms from that.
Absolutely. And I think it's also time to maybe question ourselves and just say, if GLP-1 is just for obesity, right? Because,
Sure.
I mean, 2023, we saw the boom of GLP-1. It was everywhere, especially in the US. It's still very, very well known. In Europe, it's still coming very, very slowly. I think only 3% of Europeans are using GLP-1 medication. And why I think it's so important is, besides the boom that we saw in 2023, we have also seen consumers, physicians, and the pharma industry find ways to move beyond the initial testing and initial adoption to actually understanding and the impact of medication as part of chronic disease management. So that's one thing. So we've seen GLP-1s used for kidney disease management, for chronic conditions, for obesity, right? But this also comes with really interesting side effects like fertility. And now we have Ozempic babies, which was a huge term online, right? So as we see the long-term implications of Ozempic or GLP-1 medication alike, I find it really interesting to see how we're just moving from a trend, which is, yes, losing weight. Of course, society's obsessed with this for health reasons and aesthetic reasons, but also to see the long-term implications that we can have on the life of patients and how physicians can understand and support patients in the long term, not just for disease management, but also for lifestyle adjustments. There were some studies that were saying that people actually, unlike most community thought that people were using GLP-1s were lazy and that they would bounce back and gain weight. Actually, there's lots of studies that say, well, they actually continue with their behavior. So behavior has changed. And then the second part that I find very interesting is that the pharma industry, along with some really interesting players, are also creating a data-driven ecosystem of solutions around GLP-1. So I'm very, very happy, and I'm very curious to see where we go from there. And I'm looking forward to see how obesity, which is a global issue, global pandemic, also pivots to have a sustainable and long-term care, data-driven and science-driven.
It's still amazing how you look at obesity. For a long time was a medical condition that was linked to having no willpower, and you could almost nothing do about it. And now with the rise of GLP-1s, but also all the tech solutions that came about it, we saw Weight Watchers went away from their name, and when GLP-1s came, they went back to Weight Watchers. So there's a lot of things happening just because we can do so much now. And what I've noticed is that I looked up some numbers. You mentioned that 3% in Europe is using GLP-1s. In the States, it's about 12%. So it's 4 times as much. And for the past 3 years, what we've noticed in the States is that the obesity rates are going down. So we went from 40%.
First time in history as well, right?
First
Which
time
is
in history,
crazy.
yeah.
Crazy.
So we always went up, and since 2023, it went down from 40% of obesity, which is still massively high, to 37. But that is the drop that we've seen. Now, the sad news about it is that the diabetes rates aren't declining. It's still at 14%, almost 14%, which is still radically high. But imagine if the obesity rates goes down a little bit more, we might see that peak arriving in diabetes.
And I think with this also comes with the loss of stigmatization of obesity. So one thing, but also access to medication. A lot of people, especially if you see 2023, this was a lot endorsed by celebrities and endorsed by, I mean, it was not really accessible, and it was endorsed by people that sometimes endorse also very shady things that do not give you a lot of trust. And now, as you see, I don't know, my brother-in-law is using actually a GLP-1 in the US, and his life has completely transformed. He can now play with my niece. He has a lot of energy to go to work. His chronic condition, he has a heart condition, has immensely improved. So, I mean, we see this firsthand as a society. And my opinion personally has also changed radically.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, if we're talking about the access to medication, I think I have to look towards Roberto at this point, right? Because you have some things that you've done in the space and that you've seen happening in the space as well.
Yeah. So first off, I have to say, Given Frontiers is also a game of first. This is the first Healthusiasm with the audience.
Yes.
It's also the first time I'm doing something at Frontiers in a breakout session on top of being the chairman. So that's why I'm like having 4 eyes on the various phones and whatever, but all is great. So that's good. So that's a first for me too. No,
Thank you for that, by the way.
No, that's a real pleasure. No, that's fascinating. I have to say that I struggle a little bit, and I'll get to your point in a second, with my enthusiasm, right? Because in my work as a health innovation president at Eversana and as an investor, it's my job to see things, right? And also see things that are about to happen. That's the game, right? Try to get in at the right time. So first, I want to second the discussion we had before about menopause. I'm also watching that space very closely. I think there's so much that needs to be done there and is being done there. So I just don't add anything to what has been very well said, just a big endorsement and a space to watch for sure. And we have also some menopause companies pitching these days. So there's already quite a bit around the conference, as you would expect. So that's point one. So I'll pick up on based on what Christophe, you just said. And so I'll make a point about access in general. And probably you heard me saying this before. Access is very important, but beyond what we have been historically saying, because in the past, we have been discussing access as a, I would say, end game, advisable. Of course, who's against access, right? Nobody. But truth is, for many, many years, we had very little to do about it because we didn't have the tools, right, to really crack that nut, which is very hard to crack. Because access, let's be clear, access at the end of the day is about, in my definition at least, lower the cost per interaction and therefore broad, right, the ability to access, which is a combination of different things, availability, affordability, and so on and so forth. Even awareness plays a big role in access, because if you don't know, you would not look for, and you won't get a prescription, and so on and so forth. So it's a very holistic aspect. That's why I always have seen access and personalization as the two really end games of digital transformation in healthcare. So with that said, I think we now have a combination of awareness, thanks to COVID, the technology, thanks to especially AI. And I say this as one that has been working on AI since more than 10 years now, before the trend, but also process innovation, policy innovation, that all combined can eventually bring us to access. So, and it's a journey, made of, I would say, steps in the right direction. So I've been fortunate enough to work on several of those steps. One, I think, also goes into this notion of direct to consumer or direct to patient, or as I launched in Europe to be a bit more regulatory friendly in a good way, direct to disease. Because in Europe, if you say direct to patient, there's a little bit of a, instinct adverse
So
reaction,
you call it direct to disease?
direct to disease.
That's nice. I love it.
Thank you. We started to introduce this terminology like a few months ago, so it's relatively new. And why we are conceiving this? Because again, the concept is the same as in the States, but it's a little bit more viable from a regulatory standpoint. And it's really what we are doing there. So what's the idea behind essentially on both sides of the pond is the same thing. And the projects we've been working on, like Lilly Direct, that is public in the United States, but also we have other things in the pipeline, both in the States and in Europe. So the idea is to use the technology and process redesign to shorten the connection between the need that the person has and the solution. And the solution, in my word, could be a drug, could be a device, could be a combination of both. And the device could be also a digital medical device combined with a drug or standalone. Those are all therapeutic solutions, as I like to say. And I think a big trend will be how we can better connect the need with this. And when you do that, there's a lot of things that happen. So I'll close with this to try to make it visual. Literally, in my opinion, every healthcare act is a journey. Even the most simple thing, a blood sample, reading the blood sample and getting a prescription, and then eventually take the medicine, that is a journey, right? And there are, of course, more complex ones. Think of a complex chronic disease or a multimorbidity and so on and so forth, or conditions which are not diseases, but still, have. So those journeys are full of friction points. You don't know what you don't know. Is that the right therapy for me? The adherence in itself, it's a big one. The price, the getting the script. In Europe, we said before, GLP-1 is at the fourth of the adoption in the United States. The average time to get a consultation from the doctor that is empowered to prescribe a GLP-1 in Europe ranges between 5 and 8 months, depending from the countries. So even if you qualify from a BMI perspective, still you need to do certain blood exams, of course. Then you get to that visit, that access is limited, and then only after you can get your prescription. So this journey is full of this friction point. So my notion about accessibility as pertains to GLP-1 and others is to really map those friction points, understand which type of technology and process redesign you could throw against them, and unleash that inefficiency. If you do that, there's more money in the equation that you can redistribute. Some goes back to the user as a saving or to the payer, depending on the system. Some go back to the pharmaceutical company that is manufactured because maybe has less steps in between, right? The manufacturing and the actual, reimbursement. And so my vision is that we work on this combined, we might get there. And if I have like 2 seconds more on the GLP-1 thing, I want to add just one thing. Yes, they are an incredible new category that for years we will discover new applications. I have zero hesitations about that. But at the same time, they are a bit of a shortcut. So I think as we take that shortcut, we shouldn't discard the importance of behavioral change, the importance of nutrition, and I would say strategic, nutritional strategy while you are on GLP-1 and after, because otherwise we'll probably just get, I would say, we'll catch part of the opportunity, and maybe we'll encounter some risk of rebounding after. So I think that a wise combination of digital aids, supports, and programs in and around the GLP-1 therapies will go a long way to unleash the value that is inherited in those therapies.
I think I completely agree with you, Roberto. And I think what I find interesting is that, the yo-yo effect that is so famous for dieting, it still can happen, right? But I think, especially for the patients that really had medical issues that didn't really like that traditional dieting or traditional exercising methods just did not help them to lose weight. It's also empowering for them to see that it is possible. And I think that comes with a certain awareness and consciousness that has to be supported by digital solutions. Absolutely. And I think by new care pathways, and we need to really rethink a little bit how we see obesity within the healthcare system, because the traditional ways that we have dealt with it was a stigma, it was a shame, it was, so completely agree with you.
Yeah, what I like about it, by the way, when you were explaining the whole access view, the way that you view access, is that, first I'll just take a couple steps back. I think when you started with Lily Direct, my first reaction was, yeah, how long will that last? That was my first reaction because we've been waiting for it for so long. One will try it, they'll probably be killed in the media, and then they'll stop it anyway. So I'm happy to see that there's more coming. Because one of the things that we've been missing in healthcare is actually experience. The journey is full of frictions, and removing that away, I think is one of the most important things that we need to achieve in healthcare. And in my opinion, that's also why so many companies outside of healthcare try to move into the healthcare space, because they are better at experiences. That's also why, and that comes to your next Healthusiasm, so many fitness trackers, so many health tech or consumer tech companies are moving into that space because they provide a better experiences. But what we also see is that these healthcare or these health trackers, they're moving into the medical space as well. I think that is what you also see this year, right?
Yes. So I'm a wearable girl. I'm a wearable girly. I've had my Oura Ring for almost 5 years. So I love that. And I also have a Garmin watch.
I think you too, right?
Yeah.
You have one? I know.
I think Roberto and
Roberto has one. Yeah, okay.
So we're in Healthusiasm. I think most of us have an Oura Ring, and we usually in every episode we talk about the Oura Ring and what's happening with Oura, which is super interesting because they actually have been making huge steps when it comes to moving more into the medical side of things, right? So I think it was beginning of this year. I think it was February or March. Oura actually announced that they had hired their first official medical advisor and they started their own medical team. Which, I mean, if you take a step back and you look at it as a wearable company, they should have had medical teams behind before. But what I noticed is that, I mean, they have very robust clinical studies. They partner with really respectable organizations, and I've also seen the Oura app and the Ring change immensely throughout the years. When I got my first Oura Ring, this was 2020, more or less, a pandemic. I was not exercising, not going out. And now, and the scores were very basic. And now I have so much information about myself, from my VO2 max to my like hormones and where I am in my cycle and my body temperature to my physical activity. But what I find interesting is the fact that because of the creation of this and the hiring of this medical team as part of the Oura team, basically they have really started to move into menopause, and they have done really interesting studies on perimenopause and menopause and connecting from a clinical study, so not directly as a certified medical device, but they started to really focus on specific topics that are very interesting and to target specific groups of people. So women's health has become a really important part of Oura. They also came out in the news a couple of months ago, I think this was September, that they partnered with Palantir. And this was very questionable. We talked about it in our last episode, actually, because a lot of people know Palantir as a company that is working with the government of the US, that is also, it's basically platform for security and also for tracking specific groups of migrants and so on. So it's very questionable from various points of use, but Oura actually is using their device to support the DoD, Department of Defense in the US, to help readiness of their own employees. And if you're thinking about defense, it's interesting. But so that's one point. And I think the second point is also how we see Whoop also being threatened by the FDA for making claims that were not properly backed, and for those claims actually needed to have a certificate. And what Whoop did was actually standing their ground, and they did change a little bit their communication, but they actually kept offering the information to the users. So from one side, we see medical teams moving into the wearable sector, which was not so prevalent before. But on the other side, we also see that there's a lot more attention on clinical results, clinical studies, and consumers are becoming a lot more aware into how is this backed, what I see in the app.
Yeah, and I think that's a bit the result of the popularity of those kind of devices, right? I mean, the number of people that use Whoop, the number of people that use Oura Ring, the number of people that has an Apple Watch or any Garmin, whatever you may have. And it is that demand. I mean, they've been using it for counting their steps, and there's more devices and more biometrics that are being measured. But bit by bit, we're coming closer to that medical field. And so it becomes a requirement to move in that space. And what I really liked as well, I think it was in January, that Validic, which is a company that integrates and take the data from all the consumer wearables, they announced that they would be integrated into Epic as an Oracle Health. So the two electronic health records in the States who are majorly dominant. And so you will now have from 350 different Whoop and Aura, different types of wearable trackers. All that data will be filtered into the electronic health record to be able to also analyze this, which is not bad because one in two people have an activity tracker. So that might be interesting to also follow up on that.
I just cringed a little only because the feedback I've always heard from clinicians on that Whoop and Aura data is like, okay, you know what? I don't need to know every moment of the last 365 days of your life. So that was my face, is that now it's being in the EMR. So let's hope that there's some cute little Gen AI thing that makes sense of all of this data that's coming in so that the clinicians are not. Yeah, I mean, hey, let's hope that that last mile is important because you can have all that data sitting there, just like we've always had all of that data sitting there. And unless the clinician can make sense of it, what is the point of having it there?
But I think the reason why this is happening is because we're actually having more health information outside of the healthcare system than inside of the healthcare system. So that's why it needs to happen anyway. So, right, of course, clinicians are not trained for that. Coming back to Awesome and how they are playing a role in that as well.
And thank God we have ChatGPT to ask our own medical questions. And that's who cares about our Aura Ring data and our Whoop data is ChatGPT.
But actually about that, so last night I went to a pre-Frontiers dinner and I was sat next to a cardiologist who was wearing an Aura Ring. And he would recommend Aura to his patients. And he's using the information when the patients who have an Aura coming to the consultation is looking at that. I think that's amazing. I'm like, wow, like I want my doctor to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a time and a place for it. It has to be done in a way where it's actually useful because then we end up in the same situation that we're at now with a whole bunch of our health data.
If I might, that's a great example of the process innovation that I was saying before.
Yeah.
Because here this ton of data are useless if not analyzed. The physician can't do it unless in some elite clinic. So in order to make it that viable, you need a little bit of a maybe GPT algorithm or something that very easily, because that's what they're good at, making sense of a trend and return as just an index, right? And this can be done today. Now, what if this index is also aware of the guidelines? And so he's able to put that in context of something that is medically viable. We're not that far from that, but it could be a good use case, So that's one of the companies I work with who's doing something like that. They connect all your devices and they summarize clinically in a very simple way so that when you initiate your telehealth consultation, the doctor on the other side is basically prompted in the minutes immediately before the call with, this is a person that has this scoring, this thing as a summary of that. That little thing, which is not rocket science, makes those data viable versus anything else would just be like an adverse reaction. So I cannot, get all the signals from you. Just saying.
And that's actually a very good bridge to my Healthusiasm because I really wanted to talk about exactly that. And I'll start off with what Aura is doing because Aura was one of the first ones in the beginning of the year they called it a personal advisor. So the Aura Advisor was launched to the premium members, which actually it looks at all your data, your covering data, and you can have a chat with it. So it's a GPT, if you will, that is inside of Aura, and the Aura Advisor then say, well, I need to run your marathon or your high rocks as you would do. And then it will give you the advice on how to recover or when to sleep or how maybe even discuss on how your sleep went. Same goes probably for menopause, which is also a big focus of Aura. And I think all these advisory roles, these personal assistants, the personal health assistants, virtual doctors, to me, that was the biggest Healthusiasm that I took away. And it started with a study from the Harvard Business Review. I don't know if you've seen it, but the number one use case around the world for using LLMs, Gen AIs, was therapy and companionship. So people are using ChatGPT most for therapy and companionship. And you saw that also in a number of projects that were launched, whether directly or not directly. We talked about Aura, but Apple, the project Mulberry was mentioned a couple of times during the years. It's always a big mystery, but it was something that we already talked about last year as well on the podcast. But it was the first time that it came about that Apple would do something with all the data they're sitting on. They have the health data app. It has a ton of data, but they don't really do anything with it. They put it available for any other app that might use it. But now they actually so-called would have a virtual health coach that will use and help you along with the data that is available. It would even have some videos from real doctors giving you, like with this artificial humans, virtual humans that talk to you to motivate you. To me, the big question will still be, will Apple go into the virtual doctor space, or will it still be like some sort of, hey, here's your data and let's see what you do with it? So we have Apple, we have Aura, we have Google, did a couple of amazing things this year. So they have the Fitbits for the premium. They also rolled out an AI coach, a personal health coach, and they did a big piece of research, which you really need to read if you like that stuff. It's the personal health agent. And what they had as a view on things was that you don't only need a virtual assistant, one virtual assistant, but you need a virtual assistant, a personal health assistant that manages different other AIs. And they did a whole research on that. And what came out of it is that if you have that personal health assistant that manages your other health AIs, it will be more performant. So they are way into that sphere. So they already have the health AI coach and the Fitbit, and then they move into the personal health assistant space. Samsung really has a different view. They want to have the home health hub. They announced it also at CES in the beginning of the year. And the idea is that everything in a house should be linked to your health. And on top of that, they have the Xelt purchased, which is a company that actually can prescribe digital health tools, talking about access. They also have HealthTap, which allows you to book a conversation immediately with your physician virtually or online. So they really want to bring the entire health experience that you can do digitally into your home. Different view again. Panasonic went very deep as well. They launched in the beginning of the year Umi. And instead of having, the sports coach or, the hub at home, they really want to focus on a family health coach. So they look at it from a family point of view, because very often you spend a lot of time with your family and people take care of each other. And so they have a health coach which helps the entire family to not only manage, the way that you go about your health, but also the stress that comes with family life. It's apparently built on Anthropic, this one, the Claude. And then I go to China, where all of these were still very health, wellness related. But in China, they are moving into virtual doctor space. So you have DeepSeek, you might have heard of it, which is a smaller LLM, a smaller AI model, which runs on cheaper devices. And they are using it now to manage blood pressure in rural areas. So if you don't have these smart, heavy processor type of phones, you can have it on easier phones that are less expensive and have a doctor, what's it called? Dr. Pi, I believe, Dr. Pi, PAI, which actually will help you to manage your blood pressure. It looks at all the data and it will guide you as a physician to help you with that. And then insurance company Ping Health, they started doctor avatars. So twins, digital twins from existing doctors, because in China, it's basically impossible to get into a hospital to talk to physicians. That's why the old Chinese medicine is also so popular still there, because that is the first line that they have there. And so Ping Health has now started a AI doctor with whom you can actually talk to. So it's a medication recommendations. It can interpret certain results, medical results that you get back. But you can also actually have a real conversation, a consultation with a virtual twin of a doctor that exists, so that you have that primary care, that first line doctor setting out there. So I found 2025 to be very not only interesting because the use case of therapy and companionship is so much already here, but then you see all these big companies which basically are not yet in the healthcare. We don't consider them in the healthcare. They're moving into the space of personal health assistants, of virtual doctors, whether it is in a home, whether it is looking at the family, whether it is directly with physicians, whether it is with copying existing physicians. I think, to me, this is one of the most interesting things that we have seen this year. And these assistants, and I think this is the power of AI, the fact that it thinks for you, it can use your data. I think this is the future that we will be seeing. And I think I look to you again, Roberto, because you had also something which you were very secretive about. There's something coming up. I will not say what, but it will be a surprise. So here's the floor then.
Yeah, no, that's something that I want to I can talk about. It's not public yet, so we'll come soon. But I completely agree with all these trends. There's something that along those lines we have been working on and will be live in Q1. So we are now in this kind of testing phase. And it's essentially, there's so much more we can do in general, right? But it's hard because we have little time and we don't need to overthink, because we already have very complicated lives, right? So if we think about nutrition, it's fascinating if you think how little we care about it, right? Because maybe we pay attention to calories, but sometimes nutrients, right? There are some schemes like the 5 colors, this and that, which are just ways to simplify something that shouldn't be complicated because you should just normally eat, but instead it is complicated because of our habits, right? So something we have been observing and working on is essentially if you really go into functional nutrition in a way that your daily meals are a lot more strategic to you or your health, which means your gender, your age range, your potential other conditions, your weight, of course, goes without saying, and so on and so forth, and your preferences and your intolerances, and it's already a list of 7, 8 things. Now, when you start to combine those things by the ingredients, the nutrients, and the preparations, and the places you could be eating, that could be home, office, school, whatever, right? Plane, you name it. It starts to become very complicated, right? Because you have, a certain number of variables on an axis and then all these others. And turns out that unless you have time and money and attention to just focus on your nutrition, which also doesn't make much sense, because there are better things to do in life. It turns out that you eat essentially what you can normally. And then sometimes you pay attention, right? So it's like you have a wonderful Ferrari as an Italian. I think I can use that analogy. And then you don't care about the oil, the maintenance, and the gasoline you put inside. And so one day is water, one day is gasoline with something. Of course, that will crash the engine, which is exactly what we do. So we have been working on, guess what, an AI assistant that is basically similar to what you heard about Kronos on anticipation of diseases, that has been trained on a very wide set of individuals, anonymized, of course, correlated with the meals they've been taking for many, many years, and data points about essentially their key lab exams and weight and whatnot. So it's a pretty rare and unique data set out of a clinical nutritional practice on healthy people and some people that had other conditions and diseases. Essentially, working on this, we have been able to generate an algorithm that is being able to generate synthetic patients on a large scale. So we obtain like essentially 500,000 of those. And we have been using those data to essentially train an agent that is showing, as early testing is very positive, the ability to do all that complex job for you. So in other words, it will generate meals that are doable. So not like crazy stuff that you would never able to do unless you don't have a life or don't have a job and you're very rich. So you get somebody that does for you. But something very clear, very practical, very pragmatic, that the week before the week that you are getting the meals for, it gives you exactly the type of things you can eat with a very, I would say, good degree of freedom in your taste that respects your intolerances and preferences and your even, religious obligations and whatnot. So it's all trained with that and gives you exactly, like morning, lunch and dinner in a functional way, and also the way to prepare things. And by combining that, the level of improvement that is able to give in terms of weight and energy level and focus and attention and sleep quality and whatever in the course of 3 months is incredibly remarkable. So that's something that we have been working on and is now in this test phase. Testing is very complex because, of course, there's all these conditions and variables, but it's showing great progress. And the vision is that it will come to fruition in early next year. And then on that basis, the idea, given this is functional nutrition, is that you can adjust this algorithm by menopause, for example, right? Because maybe the way you need to feed yourself there is different than if you are pregnant or trying to,
Probably.
get there,
Yeah.
probably, right?
Mm.
If different, if you run marathons or you do nothing like me, So there are different situations, so to say. And so that's something quite exciting. We started 2 years ago. It's been a ton of work. It's fascinating. It seemed impossible in the beginning, but it's getting there. And the early signs is very promising. And so we'll come to life, hopefully Q1 next year, depending on the testing out there going. So a little anticipation, and then we'll
Cool.
unveil with the brand and the model and whatever, in due course. But this is something that I think is a good, application of everything we said in the AI space.
Exactly.
And I can see a lot of things like this with the rigor of science coming to life and make our life kind of easier on those fundamental things, and nutrition is, of course, one of them.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it. I'm very curious to see. And will it be a medical device, or would it be still in the wellness space first and then moving into the?
This will start as a class 1.
Okay.
So we'll get a little kind of light approach,
Yeah.
but will be designed as with the potential to be a digital medical device class 2A. So everything will be in there, but we'll start with a class A self-certification in Europe, but ready to go into that one, depending on how that will need it to be done based on the business model that will come. What I can anticipate, this will start direct to consumer, because we believe
That's what you need to do.
there's a space for that, and we want to have fast adoption with as much data as possible. But I think, given what I see there will be space for Diga, Root, Pecan, or the new one that probably Italy will approve, to talk about my country that comes always last, but then does good normally. So just to say,
What country is that?
Italy. It's a boot-shaped country, but very famous. We invented music and a few other things.
Pasta and food and
Pasta. We are good at nutrition, though.
yeah, right. Totally. One of the 5 blue zones.
I think one of my favorite things of what you're saying, Roberto, and congratulations, and thank you for sharing this here, is the fact that, nutrition and empowerment of patients, or just people in general, in the last years has gone everywhere, right? We first had the trends of like keto diets, we had vegans, like being in Berlin, there's so many vegans, and it's very easy to get vegan food. Being in Paris is completely the opposite. I am not vegan, but I do like to eat healthy. And I think there's a lot of misinformation about what eating healthy is. And I love that you're connecting prevention, the cultural aspect, and the belief system of people, and also the lifestyle. Like when I did High Rocks a couple of weeks ago, and I'm doing another one in a month, and it's very cardio intensive. And I realized I was exhausted at some point, not because I was training too much, I wasn't eating enough. I needed to eat more carbs. And don't hate me, I know you're Italian, but I don't like pasta for different reasons. But I realized I needed to eat pasta and I needed to eat carbs, and I was completely underfueling myself. And this was a belief that, despite I think I'm an educated consumer, it was very clear. And I was like, oh, okay, I feel very, very stupid right now, not eating enough and I should eat more. So
No, I completely agree. And by the way, they have, I heard, baguettes in France, so you can compensate.
and croissants, don't worry.
The example that you just gave made me think of another great healthusiasm that we talked about on the show, which I did not list here. And I think it was brought to you by Yazan. We had on the show a guest, and he was talking about Delphi 2M. And Delphi 2M is based on, I think in the Nordics and Denmark, they have almost all health records public, and they can track the data and analyze a lot of elements in there. And they combine it with 50,000 electronic health records in the UK, I believe. And now what they can do is they can actually predict 1,000 different diseases up front. And the big advantage there would be that instead of saying like, look, you're somebody from 50 years old, you need to come in for a certain checkup, they can actually look at your actual status and the risk that you have in certain checkups. And it will not be calendar based, but really, based on your actual situation. And we will see more and more, whether it is food preventative or whether it is even, looking at all the health data to be able to predict when somebody will become sick, so that we can monitor and scan and do the tests at the right moment. I think we're at a very exciting times. And I think if we do this again next year, definitely we'll have a lot more, even more exciting things coming up. Now, if we talk in Gen AI, and I'm looking at you, then Jessica, you wanted to bring in a couple of elements on patients' rights and so forth as one of the important things here, or?
Yeah, I certainly can. I mean, I don't know if it fits into this conversation exactly. I'm like ready to go find a microbiome startup to introduce to Roberto to be like, can we make these two things together, please, so I can adjust my microbiome? But on the Gen AI thing, you had asked, what has been a big topic. And obviously, that is like the biggest topic this year. And one of the things that I feel like I'm starting to get a sense of in, gossiping around with other people at other conferences is what this question about when we're going to hit the trough of disillusionment. So how many of you have heard of the Gartner hype cycle, right? With the curve? Yeah. Where are we? When are we going to hit the trough? Because there are a lot of questions, from a regulatory standpoint in the US. Believe it or not, but we don't have our act together on this. Things are up in the air
Just on
right
this?
now. And many other
Okay.
things. So like, believe it or not, right? So one of the big questions right now, in terms of how do you regulate Gen AI, they're looking at this from a policy standpoint and there are no clear answers. And so even in the FDA, there's just no real pathway to regulation for this. And so there's some emerging stuff that's a little bit interesting, asking some of these questions that I think are great questions to ask right now. Like, should it even be regulated as a medical device? Or should it be made to be regulated more like a doctor in certain applications where it has to pass a medical board and then it has to have continuing medical education and receive certifications as it goes, depending on the use case for whatever the Gen AI is doing. It might make more sense for it to be regulated like a clinician, in which case we have a whole world of headaches in America where every clinician is subject to the state boards as opposed to a national board. So that'll be different. But some of the other questions on the patient's rights fronts, and this is where I think we might see some pushback first, because I'm not sure if you recall the days of blockchain. Anybody old enough to remember when blockchain was going to change everything? I'm still waiting, right? It was like, we're going to change everything by blockchain. I'll be paying you. You'll be paying her. We'll pay for everything. And like, not that I know of, have used it, but there was a big cliff, right? There was the trough of disillusionment. And so with any technology, you've got your early adopters and, we're kind of in this room, and then you have everybody that follows. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes what you end up using the technology as amazing and powerful as it can be for is to make like cute fake cat videos for the internet. So I'm interested to hear what happens with AI. And from a clinical standpoint, from a patient standpoint, what I've been hearing from hospitals in the US are some questions about the ethics around it. And specifically, this was in the context of medical malpractice. So how do you not get sued for using AI on a patient? At which point should the patient be notified that AI is being used at any point in their medical treatment? Is this something that they're going to be notified of up front? And is everybody going to understand that? And who on the clinical team is going to be the one to tell them that and explain that to them in English so that they know what they're signing? And then further, it's like, should we always use the clinician in conjunction with the AI? Because from what I've seen over the years, there's a lot of AI stuff it runs on its own without you seeing it. It's just on in the background. And now with some of the things that Epic and Cerner, the two big EMRs, have rolled out, where there are different types of population health, GPTs and things like that, where they're using clinical data in the hospital, that's running in the background all the time for any type of clinician to use, and clinical decisions being made from it. So at what point do you let the patient know? And then can the patient opt out of it? That's another big thing I've heard a lot of debate on. Like, what if I want a GPT-free medical experience? Can I do that? Or what if I want to go the other way and I want to not listen to what my doctor is saying because I've used open evidence and backed by the American Journal of Medicine and the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA is telling me this. So I'm going to go with what I want to do on the AI, not what the clinician wants me to do. Who's responsible then? So there's a lot of these ethical questions coming into play. And another last one I'll give you, just to kind of think about, because I feel like it's applicable anywhere around the world. So in the US, we've got our rural hospitals, right? Just like you have rural areas here. And we have the cities that have these academic research medical centers. And as you would imagine, studies have been done on this now that show the academic medical research centers in the cities, they're customizing their own models, using their own patient data, building their own models off of that. But in the rural hospitals, they're not. They're buying products off the shelf. And so if you're buying products off the shelf that have been trained using a patient population that looks nothing like your patient population, what's going to happen? So this is where some of these bigger questions about the ethics, patients' rights, health equity are starting to come into play in the American discussion. There are some of us who still care about these things, and we are talking about them.
It's a pretty an interesting discussion, and indeed, it didn't really exactly fit in what we were saying previously, but I think it's a very good reflection, because what have we been doing for the past, let's say, 45 minutes is that we looked at all of the great healthusiasm that we've seen in the past year, and there was some menopause, we had GLP-1, we had awesome, how the education is changing. We talked a whole bunch about AI and virtual doctors and assistants that are coming up, but I think we might forget, if we're looking forward and if you want to innovate, what is then the reality in day-to-day life, and how will that go? Please, if you want to.
I was going to say, at the very end of it, to wrap it all together, the decision is going to be made by the clinicians and the patients on all of this stuff, all of these, and that's always kind of been the bottom line.
And the regulators probably, no?
Maybe.
Maybe.
And it depends, because right now the clinicians and the patients are doing their own thing in the States, while the regulators are just like, we don't know, let's just see what happens.
They're still trying to figure out what Facebook is, right?
Yeah, right.
What we try to do as well when we end up all these healthusiasms is we always have a couple of unusual ones, which is then we look at, or I came across a couple of words, a couple of new trends perhaps, and I then ask my panel here with me, and I will save my usual panels, Nia and Lin, so I'll go to both of you because they know the answer basically. So what I try to do is I try to let them guess what it could be about. It's an unusual healthusiasm. So they need to think about what it can mean. And that is kind of what we will try to do now to end up this 1 hour podcast. So I'll first go to you, Jessica. You got the floor. You got any idea what wellness stack is?
Wellness stack.
You're in the health, in the tech space, so maybe you might figure that out.
Do you want me to guess?
Yeah, I really want you to guess.
Would you like a guess? Okay,
Yeah.
I would say my wellness stack is all of the things that I do to manage my everyday health. So my wearable, my new diet planning app that's coming soon, me talking to ChatGPT, whatever meditation app I use. I would say it's whatever stack I have built myself to manage my
Exactly.
everyday wellness.
Because in tech, well done. Maybe we can have a round of applause. Come on. So no, in technology, if you choose to work in a company, you choose what tech stack you want to have. So what we see now is that every individual starts to have their own wellness stack, because there's a lot of solutions that you can choose from, and so you build your own stack for yourself, and then this is where you go from. Wellness stack, something to think about. Roberto, the final one is for you before we close out.
Good luck.
Good luck.
I set the bar high here.
Very much. So. You can ask for a helpline. Oh, he loses points then. What is the Whisperverse? So we had the metaverse, but what is the Whisperverse? What could it be? The Whisperverse. Think out loud if you want, or you have a guess, yeah?
So maybe about all the nudging we are getting from
Continue.
various, I mean, if you connect the wellness or health stack, to, and you multiply by the apps and the devices, they're all producing notifications.
Mm-hmm.
So on my phone, every now and then, I get like 10 of them to say I should measure blood pressure here, put the things there, my data left and right. So I don't know. Basically, based on how it sounds, it feels to me all the suggestion and nudging that I'm getting about all the various sources, etc. But
You want to complete it?
That was going to be my guess. And I maybe would add to it all of the influencer podcasting health advice that you're getting to it, like literal whispers, like eat more.
Well,
greens.
you're 100% correct, but something is still lacking. It's about whisper. So what would be the device? It's not your phone, literally. It is the earpieces that you have in your mouth or the smart glasses that we're wearing around. So we're moving into a space where more and more we have these small voices next to us. Yeah. Potentially. That all these AI and personal assistants that we talked about will actually speak to you in real life.
I kind of thought about that, but I was making the example of notifications to say all the various things that come. But
you have all the points. Please give him an applause, please. Thank you.
I'm going to say you're still stuck in the nudgiverse. We need to move you to the whisperverse.
Gotta love it. Well, thank you all for your Healthusiasms. So many positive things, as you can see, are changing the world. And this is what we bring with the Healthusiasm podcast. Every month, we try to bring all these innovations that are changing the world around us. Time to wrap up this podcast. The first live one here at the 10th year anniversary of Frontiers Health. I mean, we will be talking about that for sure. Thank you for listening. Thank you, the audience, for being here. Thank you also the panelists. More specifically, thank you, Jessica Damassa. Thank you, Nia Escobar-Culla, Aline Noizet, and Roberto Arcione. My name is Christophe Choquet. We are the Healthusiasm panel, and we'd love to see you again next month for some more Healthusiasm. It will not be in Frontiers Health, but at our regular podcast channel that you can find us everywhere. Ciao.